My nephew thought his broken game project was the worst thing that could happen, until he realized I didn't just crash his future. I accidentally handed the evidence straight to the feds. The scent of overbrewed coffee and slightly burnt toast usually signaled the start of a peaceful Sunday morning at my place. Today, however, the air was thick with something metallic and sharp, the smell of panic, mostly originating from my nephew, Leo. He was 22, sharp as a tack, and deeply, passionately invested in the idea of becoming a game developer. A dream that, as it turned out, I had apparently just incinerated with a single, carefully timed keystroke 3 weeks ago. I was sitting at the kitchen island, reviewing the closing documents for the sale of my startup's old server farm, a relic of my early 30s success. It was a boring transaction, but the money was significant, earmarked for my retirement, and more importantly, for a series of secure, long-term investments I'd been architecting for years. I'd built my life on being prepared, on having safety nets woven out of diversified portfolios and contingency funds. Leo, bless his ambitious heart, lived solely on the immediate thrill of the next big breakthrough. The front door banged open, an act of aggressive entry Leo usually reserved for dropping off empty pizza boxes. He stood framed in the doorway, his usually vibrant green hoodie looking dull against the morning light. His face was ashen, the kind of white you see just before someone faints. "Aunt Clara," he started, his voice cracking like dry wood. He didn't bother with greetings. He never did when he thought the world was ending. I sighed, setting down my tablet. "Morning, Leo. Did you finally figure out why the rendering engine keeps crashing on your side project?" He took 3 clumsy steps into the room, clutching his phone like a weapon. His eyes, wide and accusatory, fixed on me. "No, worse. Much, much worse." I braced myself. Usually, much worse involved an overdraft fee or a lost flash drive. This time, though, the sheer terror radiating off him felt different. It felt personal. "Spit it out, kiddo," I said, trying to keep my tone level. I've navigated hostile takeovers. I could handle a teenager's drama. He held up his phone, his hand shaking so violently the screen flickered between apps. He stabbed at the screen a few times before finally forcing an image to display. It was a screenshot of his online brokerage account, one that I had, against my better judgment but out of familial obligation, set up for him 2 years ago, complete with a modest starting capital and a handful of blue-chip stocks. "Look at it, Aunt Clara, just look," he choked out. I leaned closer, squinting at the small numbers. The portfolio was down. Not spectacularly, but noticeably. A 5% dip across the board. Annoying, but hardly catastrophic in the current volatile market. "It's a dip, Leo. The Nasdaq corrected itself yesterday. You know this happens." I reached for my coffee, ready to dismiss the whole thing. "No, not that," he roared, suddenly finding his voice, his posture straightening with indignant fury. He threw the phone onto the granite counter. It skidded, stopping just shy of the fruit bowl. "Look at the activity log. Look at what's missing." I picked up the phone again, annoyance starting to curdle into concern. I navigated to the transaction history, scrolling past the routine dividends and minor trades. Near the top, highlighted in stark red, was a series of large withdrawals processed over the last month, all originating from his account. Withdrawals that looked suspiciously similar to the ones I'd been executing from my own accounts recently. My blood ran cold. I hadn't touched his account. I had meticulously segregated our finances. "What is this?" I whispered, my eyes scanning the dates and amounts. It was nearly 80% of his total seed money gone. Transferred out one large chunk at a time over the span of 25 days. Leo's face crumpled. Tears, hot and furious, tracked paths through the faint stubble on his cheeks. He pointed a trembling finger toward the largest outgoing transaction. "That transfer, Aunt Clara, the one to that offshore holding company, that was the money I was putting into the seed round for Nexus Games. My investors were counting on that capital to secure the final server lease before the end of the month. That was the cornerstone of my pitch." His voice was rising to a shriek. "They pulled out this morning when the funds didn't clear. It's over." He leaned in close, his breath ragged, his eyes burning with utter betrayal. You managed my retirement portfolio for years. You set up my emergency funds. You taught me everything about protecting assets. And yet, you were the only one who knew the specific routing numbers for the trust account. Tell me, Aunt Clara, he spat the words out, each one laced with acid. You stole my future? The silence that followed Leo's accusation was deafening, broken only by the frantic internal alarm bells ringing in my own head. Stole my future? The audacity, the sheer blinding ignorance of the boy was almost insulting. But beneath the insult, a colder dread took root. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't even logged into his account. The withdrawal activity he was pointing at was real, the amount significant, but the source of the transaction confirmation in his log was impossible unless— "Leo, stop," I cut him off, my voice dangerously low, the result of years spent commanding boardrooms. "Look at the details of that withdrawal. I handle my own transactions through a private banking portal. The routing signature on these outgoing transfers wouldn't match my usual authorization sequence. It couldn't." I snatched the phone back, zooming in on the transaction header. My eyes devoured the small print. He was right about one thing. The account was emptied. But the transfer destination, a shell corporation listed cryptically as Cerberus Holdings, LLC, was unfamiliar to me. That wasn't my retirement strategy. That wasn't my safety net. Leo didn't seem to hear my denial. He was too caught up in the spectacle of his own ruin. "Don't try to play dumb with me, Aunt Clara. Who else knew about that specific holding structure? You set it up for me when I turned 18. You insisted on that high-level security clearance, the one that bypasses standard multi-factor authentication after midnight. You did this because you think I'm too reckless, don't you? You thought I'd blow the seed money on bad server hardware or some ridiculous microtransaction scheme, so you preemptively seized it to protect me." His words were a storm, washing over me with the force of a tidal wave. He genuinely believed I had executed a high-level financial betrayal to save him from himself. The protective shield I had thrown around my own assets, the move that Leo was now conflating with his own, was completely separate. "That money you see gone," I said, trying to maintain control over the narrative before he completely lost it, "was an emergency divestiture I executed 3 weeks ago. I sold the old server farm. It was a clean break, excellent timing, netting me a substantial liquidity injection. That money, Leo, is what I've been carefully reallocating into long-term, conservative municipal bonds. It has nothing to do with your development fund." I walked over to my secure, biometric-locked office door. I needed to pull up my own closing statements to show him the paper trail of my successful, ethical move. "You need to calm down and look at the timestamps," I insisted, pulling a secure keycard from my purse. "If I had drained your account, the paper trail would lead back to my digital signature, which I would never risk." I am not an amateur. Leo followed me, his breathing ragged, his skepticism palpable. "Then who has my signature? Who has access to the security parameters you put in place for me?" That stopped me dead in my tracks, keycard hovering over the scanner. I had set up his initial account, yes. I had insisted on the highest level of proprietary security, a system designed by my old firm specifically for high-net-worth individuals with complex international dealings. It required 2 factors, a physical token, which Leo kept on a chain around his neck, and a voice print verification, specifically keyed to my voice signature to authorize any withdrawal over a certain threshold without a 2-week holding period. It was my fail-safe in case Leo lost his token, or, heaven forbid, was incapacitated. I looked at Leo. He hadn't lost his token. He was standing right here. "The only other person who knows that withdrawal override code, Leo, is the authorized emergency signatory," I admitted, the words tasting like ash. "The person whose biometric data I linked as a secondary failsafe in case I was unreachable during an international crisis." Leo stared at me, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. "Who? Who did you put down, Aunt Clara? You never told me." I finally pressed the keycard into the scanner. The lock clicked open, revealing the clean, minimalist sanctuary of my home office. I walked straight to my main workstation, my fingers flying over the keyboard, bypassing the usual desktop environment and accessing the encrypted server logs directly. I put down someone I trusted implicitly, I murmured, pulling up the audit log for the 3 weeks in question. I bypassed my own transactions entirely and searched for any login activity on Leo's brokerage account that originated from outside the typical geographical parameters. The results flashed on the screen, stark and damning. 3 successful logins over the last month, all during the early hours of the morning when Leo was supposedly asleep, all originating from an IP address tied to a shared housing complex just 3 blocks from my apartment. And the user ID associated with those logins? It wasn't mine. It wasn't Leo's. It was the ID of my sister, Sarah, Leo's mother. My estranged, financially irresponsible sister who had sworn off contact 5 years ago after I refused to bail her out of another catastrophic debt spiral. But the final piece of evidence hit me like a physical blow. One of the withdrawal authorizations, the largest one to Cerberus Holdings, had a second, small, time-stamped data point attached. A timestamp that showed the override code had been triggered just after a call was placed from Sarah's old burner phone number to my landline at 3:17 a.m. the night of the transfer. A call that I, asleep in my soundproofed bedroom, had never heard. Leo peered over my shoulder at the screen, recognizing his mother's known digital footprint instantly. He recoiled as if burned. "Mom?" he whispered, his voice completely devoid of fury now, replaced by a bottomless horror. "She wouldn't. Why would she?" Before I could answer, before I could even formulate the necessary protection plan for what this meant, my sister possibly weaponizing her son's trust against me, my secure office phone began to ring. It was an encrypted, private line I only gave out to my most confidential legal counsel. I snatched the receiver before the second ring, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Clara speaking." A voice I immediately recognized, tight and breathless, came through the line. It was Marcus, my lead counsel. "Clara, you need to look at the news right now, not the financial pages, the national wire." "Marcus, I'm tied up with a severe internal security breach involving my nephew's funds. What news are you talking about?" I demanded. "The FBI just issued a federal warrant," Marcus stammered. "It's tied to Cerberus Holdings, LLC. They're freezing all assets. Clara, they're alleging massive international money laundering and fraud stemming from a shell company established in the Caymans 2 years ago. And the primary suspect listed on the warrant, the one they believe controls the outflow of funds, is someone using your old corporate shell registration code." I froze, the phone slipping slightly in my damp hand. My old corporate shell registration code, the one I decommissioned 5 years ago when my sister had sworn she was done with that life. "Marcus," I managed, my voice a dry croak, "who is listed as the managing director of that fraudulent shell corporation?" There was a heavy pause on the line, filled only with static and Marcus taking a sharp, audible breath. "Clara," Marcus finally said, his voice heavy with doom. "The managing director they named is your sister, Sarah Jennings, and they just mentioned that an associate, someone who co-signed on the initial documents with her signature proxy, is being brought in for immediate questioning." He paused again, the realization dawning on both of us simultaneously, miles apart. "Clara, they're going to be looking for you next. They think you're running this whole thing with her." The air in the office suddenly felt too thin, too heavy to draw into my lungs. I slowly lowered the receiver, placing it back onto the cradle with meticulous, unnatural care. The digital display glowed mockingly, confirming Marcus's final, devastating words. My sister, Sarah, hadn't just taken Leo's money. She had apparently looped my dormant, but still technically traceable corporate identity into a massive international fraud scheme. And now, the feds were knocking on my door, metaphorically speaking, for a crime I hadn't committed, using evidence that pointed directly to my trusted secondary contact, my sister, and an unwitting secondary signature proxy. Leo, witnessing my sudden, profound paralysis, finally stopped raging. He saw the raw fear in my eyes, the absolute shock that was far beyond the scope of a simple family argument over misplaced investments. He finally looked at the screen again, his expression shifting from betrayal to dawning comprehension. "And Clara, what is it? What did Marcus say?" he asked, his voice now unnervingly quiet. I didn't answer him. My training kicked in, the cold, hard logic that had always dictated my survival. I needed to move, now. Any delay was an admission of guilt in the eyes of the law. "Leo, listen to me very carefully. I didn't take your money, but someone else used my credentials I gave my sister, to steal it and wire it into a network of illegal transactions." My gaze swept around the pristine office, seeing it now not as a sanctuary, but as a trap. "We have maybe 15 minutes before they issue a preliminary warrant for questioning based on that IP trace." I spun around to my secure closet, pulling open the hidden panel that revealed not fashion, but emergency preparedness gear. A go bag, meticulously packed 5 years ago, waiting for the day I hoped would never come. "You're going to gather nothing but your phone, your wallet, and the clothes you're wearing. Leave everything else. Do not contact your mother. Do not contact anyone." I zipped the heavy-duty bag shut. "We are leaving, right now." Leo looked utterly lost, his dream of Nexus games shattered, replaced by the reality of federal investigation. "Leaving? Where? Aunt Clara, I have a meeting scheduled this afternoon with the city council about the local zoning permits for the studio space." "The studio space is about to become evidence in a money laundering investigation, Leo," I snapped, tossing him a set of keys to my unmarked black SUV, the one with the tinted windows and the ghost plates. "Take these. Drive exactly where I tell you. Do not speed. Do not change lanes aggressively. Blend in. If you get pulled over, you say nothing other than, 'I am calling my lawyer.'" I grabbed a separate, smaller pouch from the safe, not cash, but physical identification from my prepper stash, a valid Canadian passport under a different name, a clean driver's license, and a prepaid, untraceable satellite phone. I handed the passport to Leo, my face inches from his. "You are not Leo for the next few days. You are Ethan Cross. You are my nephew, traveling with me for a family emergency. If anyone asks, we are driving upstate to a private retreat where cell service is intentionally non-existent." As I secured my own vehicle keys, Leo's eyes widened, fixated on the passport. He looked from the document to my face, the shock replaced by a terrible clarity. "You had a contingency plan for this, didn't you?" he whispered, the realization hitting him that I was not just prepared for market volatility, but for actual criminality, for flight. "You knew she was capable of this." I ignored the accusation, already moving toward the main door. My focus was absolute. Get to the car, get out of the metropolitan area. We were halfway down the long, carpeted hallway leading to the garage when the sound cut through the morning calm. It wasn't the loud bang of a battering ram. It was the distinct, low, authoritative thud of heavy tactical boots hitting the marble flooring of the foyer. They weren't waiting for a warrant to be served. They were executing a warrant on probable cause already established by the wire transfer activity. I stopped dead. The garage access door was 10 feet away. "Leo, stay low, stay behind me," I hissed, shoving him toward the nearest alcove. Through the narrow opening between the hall and the main living area, I saw them. 2 figures in dark tactical gear, vests marked with intimidating lettering, moving with professional swiftness. They were sweeping the ground floor, their weapons held ready. They weren't the local police. These were federal agents, likely part of a specialized financial crimes unit. One agent paused near the open doorway of my office, noticing the running monitor displaying the Cerberus Holdings audit trail. He signaled his partner with a sharp hand gesture. My escape route was blocked. The agents were between us and the garage. Then, the second agent, closer to the main entrance, raised his hand and spoke into his shoulder mic, his voice echoing slightly in the hallway. "Command, we have visual confirmation of the primary subject, Clara Jennings, in the hallway. She appears to be attempting flight with a young male accomplice, requesting immediate soft entry authorization for asset seizure and apprehension." My heart seized. Accomplice. They already believed I was coordinating with someone. And then the agent paused, clearly receiving relayed information from headquarters. He looked directly down the hall, past me, toward the kitchen where Leo's abandoned phone lay next to the coffee maker. "Wait," the agent said, his tone shifting to confusion. "Command is relaying new information. The male subject matching the accomplice description has been identified as Leo Jennings, Sarah Jennings' son. He is not currently listed in the warrant. However," the agent lowered his weapon slightly, his voice taking on a more menacing curiosity, "Command also confirms that the secondary signature proxy on the Cerberus initial filing was an individual listed only by the pseudonym Ethan Cross." The agent looked straight at Leo, who was still frozen behind me, clutching the Canadian passport I had just handed him. The agent's eyes flicked from the boy's wide, terrified face to the name embossed on the document now clutched in his hand. "Freeze right there, Ethan Cross," the agent barked, leveling his weapon directly at my nephew. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit international fraud." The world tilted on its axis. The sudden, sharp command, directed not at me, the intended target, but at Leo, shattered the fragile composure I had managed to maintain. For a split second, Leo's training, the ingrained habit of freezing when confronted by authority figures, took over. He was Ethan Cross, for exactly the length of time it took for the federal agent to confirm the alias matched the warrant file. "No!" I roared, pushing myself off the wall and throwing my entire body between Leo and the pointed muzzle of the agent's weapon. The heavy go bag swung uselessly against my hip. "He is not Ethan Cross. He is Leo Jennings. He is a victim here." My outburst brought a precious heartbeat of hesitation from the agents. They were trained for a fleeing suspect, Clara Jennings, the financial architect. They were momentarily thrown by the sudden intervention of a young man they had just identified and immediately classified as guilty based on an alias they were clearly expecting. "Step away from the subject, Ms. Jennings," the lead agent ordered, his voice booming with authority, signaling his partner to move up and flank us. I held my ground, hands raised but palms facing them, a defensive posture I hoped read as compliance mixed with desperation, not aggression. "The only crime committed here is by Sarah Jennings. She used my dormant shell registration and my secondary biometric failsafe to drain my nephew's trust account. I was securing my own assets for retirement when this happened. My closing documents are on my desk. Check the timestamps. I have been liquidating, not laundering." The second agent, a larger man who had been circling toward the kitchen, spoke up, his voice slightly less strained. "Sir, the office monitor clearly shows the Cerberus transaction trail being accessed concurrently with Ms. Jennings's server farm divestiture closure. The timing is too neat. They're connected." He was right. To an external observer, the simultaneous liquidation of my safe assets and the injection of Leo's stolen funds into a network linked to my dormant shell looked like the coordinated maneuvering of a mastermind and an accomplice cleaning up loose ends. The story they were assembling wrote itself. "Leo, run!" I hissed, not looking at him, concentrating solely on maintaining the standoff. If I could just get him to the garage door, he could use the keys, drive the designated route, and disappear until I could sort out the legal wreckage. Leo, perhaps spurred by the direct threat to his immediate freedom, finally snapped out of his paralysis. He didn't run toward the garage. Instead, he reacted with the frantic, illogical energy of a trapped animal. He dodged to my right, not toward the exit, but back toward the one area the agents were least focused on, the darkened kitchen where his phone lay, the only tangible proof of his mother's involvement. "He's breaking protocol! Stop him!" the lead agent shouted. As the agents lunged for Leo, I knew I had seconds before they physically restrained him. I made the decision instantly. There was no time for diplomacy or legal argument. I had to create a diversion powerful enough to cover his escape, a diversion that made me the undeniable focus of the federal unit. I took a deep breath, pivoted sharply, and swung the heavy, metal-reinforced go bag with all the practiced force of a trained executive bodyguard. It connected squarely with the lead agent's midsection. He gasped, staggering back into his partner with a grunt of surprise, their coordinated movement dissolving into a tangle of tactical gear and raised weapons. "Go, Leo, now!" I yelled, turning my full attention to the now recovering agents. Leo didn't hesitate this time. He bolted toward the garage access door, fumbling with the unfamiliar key fob. I braced for impact. The agents recovered quickly, their shock hardening back into lethal focus. The lead agent recovered first, his composure returning instantly. He didn't fire, but he slammed his shoulder into me, knocking me off balance. As I fell, I saw Leo's panicked reflection in the polished chrome of the garage door handle. The electronic lock clicked, and the massive door began to slowly, agonizingly grind upward, revealing the bright morning sunlight outside. "Subject is attempting escape via vehicle access point," the lead agent yelled into his mic, regaining his footing and drawing a sidearm. "Lethal force authorized for fleeing suspect." My mind screamed. They were going to shoot Leo. Just as the agent brought his weapon up, Leo slammed the SUV into reverse, the engine roaring to life with a deafening, uncontrolled surge that echoed off the marble floors. The black SUV shot backward, tires squealing violently as Leo spun the wheel hard, not toward the road, but directly toward the narrow service entrance near the recycling bins, the route I hadn't even considered using. The agents yelled, momentarily stunned by the aggressive, unpredictable maneuver. I scrambled to my feet, coughing, heart pounding against my ribs, trying to see out the main windows. I watched the black SUV fishtail wildly, barely avoiding a massive oak tree, before finally correcting course and rocketing down the long driveway toward the street. I turned back to the two agents, who were now momentarily distracted, their attention fixed on the getaway vehicle. "He's gone. Now we deal with the fraud investigation," I said, dusting off my ruined silk blouse, ready to fight for my name. "I will walk out of here with you, peacefully, and you will contact your superiors to verify the secondary signatory on the fraudulent account, Sarah Jennings, and the fact that her son, Leo, is not currently indicted." The lead agent holstered his weapon, signaling his partner to secure me. "Ms. Jennings, you are coming with us for immediate processing. Your story about your sister is noted, but frankly, it strains credulity given the evidence of coordinated liquidation." As the agents moved to cuff me, the larger agent walked toward the kitchen counter to retrieve Leo's discarded phone, presumably to secure it as evidence. He picked it up, swiped the screen to unlock it, and then froze again. "Sir," the second agent said, holding up Leo's phone, his face turning a shade of alarmed gray, "you need to see this. When Leo, or Ethan Cross, picked up his phone, he didn't just leave a voice log, he accessed his messages." He turned the screen toward me. It wasn't a text message. It was a single, unread, encrypted notification from a messaging app I hadn't used in years, the same secure app my sister Sarah had used exclusively 5 years ago, before she supposedly went clean. The message sender was listed simply as S, and the contents of the message were chillingly brief. It wasn't a panicked plea from Sarah. It was a cold, calculated instruction, timed exactly 3 minutes before the FBI breach notification reached Marcus. "Don't worry about the transfer, dear Clara. The funds are safe. I needed the heat off my account first. Ethan did his part. Now, disappear. I'll take care of the rest." The message glowed on the screen, a final, brutal confirmation of a betrayal so deep it cut through the adrenaline of the federal standoff. "I'll take care of the rest." Sarah hadn't just stolen Leo's money. She had orchestrated the entire scenario, using Leo as bait, using my own protective instinct as the distraction, and using my sisterly bond as the key to unlock the entire operation. I wasn't just being framed for fraud. I was being set up as the fall girl in a much larger, meticulously planned scheme orchestrated by the one person I thought I had shielded from ruin years ago. My fight drained away instantly, replaced by a chilling clarity. Cuffs clicked onto my wrists, cold metal against skin that had just been preparing for a road trip. "You can tell your superiors whatever you need to," I stated calmly to the lead agent as he secured the second cuff. My voice was steady, devoid of panic. "But you've arrested the wrong person. Sarah Jennings, my sister, has just confirmed via this device that she needed me distracted so she could cover her tracks. You should be running warrants on any connection she has to Central America, not on my retirement portfolio." The agent hesitated, clearly receiving new information through his earpiece. The reality of the situation was clearly shifting in real time based on the digital breadcrumbs. "Ms. Jennings, the FBI desk in Miami is confirming a large transfer of funds associated with Cerberus Holdings just initiated a sweep protocol. Money is moving out of the Caymans rapidly. We are initiating global alerts." "Good," I managed. "Now listen to me. Leo, Ethan Cross, is driving a black SUV. License plate is—" I rattled off the ghost plate number. "He is scared, but he is carrying critical evidence. His mother's burner phone found in the kitchen. That phone will confirm the contact, the timestamps, and the initial communications with Sarah." The agents exchanged a look. The narrative was collapsing around them. They had come for a suspected money launderer, found a volatile scene, and now had physical evidence suggesting the true culprit was already fleeing the jurisdiction, having successfully manipulated the primary suspect into creating a diversion. The lead agent clipped his radio. "All units, pivot focus. Primary fugitive is Sarah Jennings. Issue a bolo on a black SUV, possibly driven by Leo Jennings, heading north. Priority 1, secure the vehicle and its occupant for questioning as a witness, not a suspect. He holds evidence linking Sarah Jennings to the Cerberus transfer." The next few hours were a blur of sterile interview rooms, fluorescent lighting, and endless legal jargon. My lawyer, Marcus, was phenomenal, presenting the server farm liquidation documents alongside the audit logs I had accessed in my office. The pattern was undeniable. My money was safe and moving legally toward fixed income instruments. Leo's money had been routed through a defunct shell tied to my sister's past activities. By late afternoon, the pressure on the local FBI office eased slightly. Leo was found an hour later, pulled over by State Patrol exactly where I had told him to go, a quiet diner parking lot 60 miles upstate. He hadn't panicked, hadn't spoken to anyone, and was safely secured as a crucial witness. The burner phone was recovered, solidifying the narrative of Sarah's calculated betrayal. I was released late that evening, charged initially with obstruction, but quickly downgraded to material witness status, pending the apprehension of Sarah Jennings. Back in my silent, ransacked house, Marcus stood by the doorway as I surveyed the damage. The federal agents had been thorough but respectful, cataloging the electronic evidence. "You're clean, Clara, for now," Marcus said, rubbing his tired eyes. "The money you moved for retirement is secure. Leo is safe, being debriefed, and he's already pointed the authorities toward his mother's known associates abroad. The good news is you've been cleared of running the laundering ring. The bad news? Sarah Jennings has vanished. The global alert is active, but she's gone dark." I walked over to the kitchen island, the granite still cold under my fingertips. I picked up the coffee mug I'd been drinking from that morning. It was stained with the residue of a life I thought I had secured. "She didn't just take Leo's money, Marcus," I said quietly. "She took my contingency. She used my carefully constructed identity as a smokescreen. She needed me to look guilty long enough for her to clean the slate. We'll find her, Clara. The FBI has massive resources focused on Cerberus now." "They'll find the shell company," I corrected him, looking out the window into the deepening twilight. "But Sarah is smarter than that. She needed to disappear, and she needed a perfect scapegoat. She got both." I paused, running a hand over my face. "But there's one thing she didn't count on. She didn't count on Leo being the one to bring her down, and she definitely didn't count on the fact that I still maintain remote access to every single piece of digital property I ever owned, including the access points to that old server farm. Marcus frowned. Clara, the server farm was sold. You can't access it. The hardware was sold, I countered, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face, the smile of a woman who had just been underestimated one too many times. But the encryption keys, the proprietary maintenance backdoors I built into that system when I first launched it, those were never released to the buyer. They are still linked to my master digital profile. I walked back to my office, bypassing the stunned agents, ignoring the mess. I sat down at my main console, the one they hadn't been able to completely wipe yet. I navigated through layers of forgotten security protocols, bypassing the government seizure lock Marcus had hastily put on the machine. Sarah thinks she's safe because she laundered the money out of the Caymans and used my old shell registration, I murmured, my fingers flying across the keyboard, accessing the deeply buried dormant architecture of the long-sold server farm. She thinks she's gone. But those servers hold more than just old game data, Marcus. They hold the encrypted master ledger of every single legitimate, untaxed transaction I made in the last decade. Information that could put a dozen very powerful, very dangerous people in prison. People who would rather see Sarah and anyone associated with her permanently erased. I pulled up a simple text file, the kind of temporary note I used during quick transactions, now resurrected from the dead servers. I typed a single, coded sentence, directed to a ghost address only Sarah would recognize. If she thinks she's escaping the authorities, she hasn't factored in the other people who have a vested interest in seeing her silenced. People who don't need warrants. I hit send. The door to my office swung open again. It wasn't Marcus. It was a man in a tailored charcoal suit, flanked by two silent, imposing figures who looked less like FBI and more like private security for an oligarch. The man smiled, a cold, unpleasant baring of teeth. "Ms. Jennings," the man said smoothly, his accent vaguely European, "we received your message. A tempting offer. My employers are very interested in the ledger you mentioned. But first, we need to know exactly where your nephew, Mr. Jennings, is right now. He seems to have caused quite a disturbance with our associate's recent investment."